Hi there and welcome to the latest episode of BDI's vlog series. My name's George and I'm going to be taking you through some top tips for passing your NHS interview as a histopathologist. And I put these together based on many of the successful interviews I've been able to take people through. So stay tuned and let me know what you think. Okay, so before we get into the real nitty-gritty with the clinical tips, I just wanted to cover off a couple of the more basic points ahead of the interview. So first and foremost, remember it's important to be friendly and confident and to smile in your interview because of course the team are looking for someone that they can get on with in the department, so that would be really good. It's also good if you dress smart. That's obviously going to make the best impression possible with the team, and as will arriving early. Now that's true of an interview in person as well as over a video chat such as Teams. Make sure you're there 10 minutes early in good time, and another good idea for these situations is to have a drink ready as well, because sometimes having a glass of water will give you the kind of the time you need to think of an answer before you respond. Okay, so one of the most important things that you will most likely be asked in your NHS interview as a histopathologist is going to relate to your training and your background in histopathology. Makes sense. So this is a really good chance for you to cover off all of your speciality specific training you've had, and the kind of questions you might get asked along these lines could be, tell me about yourself, or take me through your CV. And it's very likely that they'll just ask it as simply as, give me an idea of your clinical background. So when you hear this question, this is a great chance for you to talk about your background in histopathology, your training, any specialty interests that you've got, as well as a good chance to mention the opportunities that you've had to work alongside FRC Path histopathologists in your current department. So following on from yourself talking about your own clinical background, it makes sense that the kind of questions that usually follow are something in line with a clinical-based scenario. Now, just to give you an idea of what that would look like, you may be asked something in line with what you've studied when preparing for the FRC Path examinations. To give you an example, you might be asked how you would approach the grossing of a certain sample. Or you could be asked how, or the method you would take when reporting a certain sample. Now, importantly, you have to remember that these questions are not here to catch you out in any way, shape or form. They're simply there to open up a dialogue between you and the clinical team. Now, I also want everyone to remember that if you're not sure how to approach a certain report via UK guidelines, it's always acceptable to refer to how you would do so under your current medical guidelines. And if you don't know the answer to a question, it's important not to try and make anything up. The consultant team are going to be very happy to support you and give you exposure to the kind of samples that you need to work with. As long as they know the kind of things that you need help with, then everything should be fine from there. So another scenario-based question that you might get asked actually has nothing to do with the clinical sides of things. It's something that I would refer to as a situational judgment question. Now, what that could look like is, hypothetically, you might be posed a situation whereby you walk into work and you notice that one of your colleagues is intoxicated. How do you go about responding to this? Now, these can be a little tricky if you haven't prepared for them, and it has to be said, they don't always come up. But of course, answer to the best of your ability, and once again, if you're not too sure how you'd respond under NHS guidelines, you can simply answer with response to how you would in your current medical system. So the final part of the clinical section of your interview will most likely be comprised of something to do with NHS audit. Now, this is a very popular topic of discussion, especially at a more senior level such as consultant, and it comes up very regularly in NHS interviews. So I'm just going to give you a very quick overview of what this looks like. You can look into this more yourself. We'll include some links in the description below. But essentially, a basic NHS audit cycle would begin with choosing a topic that you want to investigate. You would then plan how you will undertake your audit, so your standards, your measures, your sample sizes, etc. And then you'd go on to collect the data before evaluating the results, implementing the change, and the most important part of the NHS audit process, arguably, is to re-audit. So the emphasis here is on improving the service, and if you have any chance to do this overseas before you join the NHS, that will really stand you in good stead for your NHS interview. Okay, so now that we've covered off all the clinical aspects of the interview, it's highly likely that you should expect some personal professional questions. Now, at this point of the interview, I think it's safe to say that CSER is most likely going to come up if you're going in for a specialty doctor or consultant level role. So from the hospital's point of view, they're going to be investing a lot of their time and energy into you. So what they want to see is somebody who's interested in a long-term opportunity at the trust. Somebody who understands that the commitments required to go through this process. So some of the questions you'll get around this might be along the lines of, what is your understanding of the CSER process, or maybe the old "where do you see yourself in 5 years" question, which is quite standard of most interviews. So it's important at this time that you demonstrate the CSER, your knowledge that CSER can't be done overnight. It's something that you'll need to put a lot of work and time into, and the hospital will be more than happy to support you on that journey as long as you can give them the confidence that you're going to be in post for the long run. Okay, so now that you've got an idea as to why the clinical teams are interested in your long-term goals, it should come as no surprise that you'll most likely get a couple of questions exploring why you're interested in the department specifically and what has brought you to the surrounding area. So it's very important that you do your research on the trust before you go into the interview, and that you have a good idea of what kind of samples they deal with, the kind of workload that you'll be up against, as well as the number of consultants and specialty doctors that are already on the team. That's really going to impress them. Now, in terms of your push-pull factors, if you're there for the location, if you've got family, if you like the cost of living or the transport links, well, you can be honest with them and let them know that that's the reason. Or similarly, if you're just looking to settle into a supported department who are going to help you with your CSER, just say so. Either way, regardless of what your motives are, I think it's important to be complimentary about the department, having done your research. And some of the questions that you might get along these lines could be as simple as what's made you interested in our trust specifically, and what do you think of the surrounding area? So I think my best bit of advice here would be to do some research on the hospital and the surrounding area. As your interview begins to wrap up, I think it's really important that you have just one or two questions in the back of your mind that you're ready to ask the panel. So the reason for this is that obviously it shows a willingness, it shows that you are interested in the opportunity, and that you're taking it very seriously. So some example questions you might want to take forth into your interview, they could be something like, how can I expect my responsibilities to develop over time in post? You might want to ask about the support that you'll get as an international doctor, or you might like to focus in on some of the specifics around the CSER process. Whatever it is, I would strongly advise having a mental note of them before you go in, just so you don't forget them. And you never know, if it's gone really well, you might even be asked when you can start, and I think that's always a very good sign. So overall, these have been my top tips for making a good go at your NHS interview. And if you want to, start in post anytime over the next year or so, please feel free to get in touch with me. I'm working with many international doctors, helping them pass their interviews, and usually we'd be able to take you through this in a video call before the interview, and I hope that this has been useful to anyone out there who's studying independently right now.